Remember when a movie about an 11-year-old hypochondriac and her bee-allergic best friend wrecked an entire generation of kids? Released by Columbia Pictures on November 27th of 1991, My Girl starred Anna Chlumsky as the awkward, death-obsessed Veda Sultanfuss, Macaulay Culkin as the lovable best friend Thomas J. Sennett, Dan Aykroyd as her emotionally distant mortician dad Harry Sultanfuss, and Jamie Lee Curtis as the cool, then not-so-cool makeup artist Shelley Devoto. Together, they told a sticky summer story about first kisses, mood rings, grief, and the most traumatizing willow tree in cinema history. Today, we're going to count down 15 weird facts about My Girl. And stick around for number 1 to find out how they filmed the most traumatizing scene in the movie, with thousands of very real bees. But before we jump in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hype up this video. It helps YouTube show this to more retro movie lovers just like you. Alright, grab your tissues and get ready to roll through every preteen melodrama emotion that was ever humanly possible. Number 15. The famous willow tree kiss took 15 awkward tries. The willow tree kiss in My Girl is one of those cinematic moments that people still talk about 30 years later. Sweet and tender, but awkward in exactly the right way. The trick is the awkwardness was painfully real. Anna Chlumsky and Macaulay Culkin were both 10 years old.
As filming began, these two 10-year-olds were complete strangers.
Both of them had never kissed anyone on camera before. Both of them had never kissed anyone ever, period. So when the director, Howard Zieff, lined up the shot and called action, things didn't go so smoothly. They'd laugh, get embarrassed, break character, reset, and try again and laugh again. You get how it goes, they're 10 years old. The crew burned through roughly 15 takes before landing a single usable version. Chlumsky later told Regis and Kathy Lee, with the brutal honesty only a 5th grader could deliver,
and she comes out like Kathy Lee.
I thought that. I said, oh my goodness.
You, Anna?
Good.
that they just wanted to get it over with. Culkin was even blunter about it years later. He and Anna got along fine, but having to kiss a girl, that was a personal nightmare. Same kid who fought off 2 armed burglars in Home Alone, now completely being undone by puckering up. The constant flubs and giggles ended up being the secret ingredient. Instead of a polished movie kiss, the scene captured exactly how a first real kiss feels at that age. Uncomfortable, fumbling, a little horrifying. In 1992, those 15 takes paid off when the pair won the first ever MTV Movie Award for Best Kiss. Number 14, Culkin booby-trapped the set toilet. Macaulay Culkin had just finished playing Kevin McAllister, a kid who turned home defense into an art form with paint cans and blowtorches. So nobody on the My Girl set should have been shocked when he showed up looking for trouble. The big one involved double-sided tape, which he swiped from wardrobe like a tiny criminal mastermind, and then carried straight to the school trailer, the mobile classroom where the kids would do their lessons between takes. He stuck it to the toilet seat and then waited in the next room. The target was the on-set tutor, who Culkin had decided needed a little extra adventure in their afternoon. The plan misfired. Anna Chlumsky sat down first. She said that it wasn't super glue, but it still hurt. And Culkin, listening for the bathroom door, thought for a second that he nailed the tutor. She confirmed the whole thing years later on Arsenio, with a weary fondness of someone who survived being co-workers with a 10-year-old prankster. Number 13, the funeral home was a real mansion with a side career. The Sultanfuss funeral home looked so perfectly grim in My Girl that audiences assumed Hollywood built it from scratch. Nope. That 9,500 square foot Victorian sits at 555 East Stanford Street in Bartow, Florida, and it's been standing since 1906, originally the home of a Polk County attorney named Thomas Lee Wilson, a man with very good taste in real estate. But here's a catch. Almost none of the movie's interiors were shot from inside it. The production used the real house for all the exteriors, the wraparound porch carried half the film, but built the entire inside of the funeral home on a soundstage in Orlando. And the reason, as the story goes, was the owner's stuff. The place was packed with antiques and artwork that were supposedly valuable enough to make a film crew sweat. So rather risk knocking something over that was priceless, the production just rebuilt the guts of the home from scratch across the state. A gorgeous Victorian mansion sitting right there, and they filmed the whole inside somewhere else. In 1995, the place got a second life as a bed and breakfast called the Stanford Inn. For years, fans could book a room and stand on the same driveway where Veda and Thomas J. broke a generation's heart. By the early 2010s, the inn quietly checked out. Number 12, the movie almost had a medical-sounding title. Imagine sitting down in a theater in 1991. You got your popcorn in one hand, you're ready to watch a sweet coming-of-age story called Born Jaundiced. Yeah, that was the actual working title. Imagine Entertainment developed the whole film under that name, which really sounds less like a tearjerker about first love and more like a pamphlet handed out in a hospital waiting room. The title came straight from Veda's opening monologue. Her rapid-fire list of ailments kicks off with the fact that she was born jaundiced, which locked in her hypochondria inside the first 10 seconds. The studio eventually clocked the problem. A movie called Born Jaundiced wasn't going to get parents to pile into a minivan on a Friday night. They tried to soften it with an interim title. Daily Variety reported in August of 1990 that the film had been rechristened I Am Woman, which somehow managed to feel even further from what the movie actually was. By spring of 91, Columbia finally landed on My Girl, licensing the Temptations' 1964 classic from Motown to use as the title as the centerpiece of the soundtrack. That warm, instantly recognizable melody did half the marketing before anyone reached the box office. And the gamble paid off. The new title made the film feel familiar before the lights even dimmed. The soundtrack took off, and the song got a second life of its own. A reissue rode the movie all the way to number 2 in the UK, nearly 3 decades after it first came out. Not bad for a tearjerker that almost went into theaters under a name that's better suited for a hospital chart. Number 11, a winter hit streak release. My Girl is a summer movie down to its bones. You got the willow trees in bloom, lake swims, bike rides through warm afternoons. So naturally, Columbia released it the day before Thanksgiving. Blame Macaulay Culkin's calendar, though. Home Alone had detonated the previous winter, and by 91, his face was permanently glued to the holiday season. Turkey, tinsel, the works. Summer Macaulay wasn't a thing anyone was buying, so Columbia leaned all the way in. They dropped My Girl almost exactly a year after Home Alone. They slotted it into family holiday plans and sold it like an unofficial spiritual sequel to the Culkin Christmas juggernaut. Different kid beside him, but the same poster face. Audiences bundled into coats to watch a movie about lake swims and bee swarms, and they did it to the tune of $121 million. A summer story sold as Turkey Day counter-programming. Number 10, hundreds of girls lost the role to a Chicago unknown. And the whole movie rode on one casting choice. An 11-year-old obsessed with death, carrying every scene. You miss on that, and the credits, you may as well roll them early. Columbia knew that, so they launched a nationwide search. Hundreds of girls read for Veda, and most of them showed up pre-glossed with that acting camp shine that screams tiny adult reading lines. But the team needed a kid who could do awkward comedy, real intelligence, and full-blown grief without the polish. Then, Anna Chlumsky walked in. She'd basically been working since infancy, modeling at just 10 months. Her first commercial at age 2. By 1989, she'd even logged time as an extra in Uncle Buck, sharing a set with Culkin, though the two never actually crossed paths there, a detail that the universe was clearly saving for later. Outside of her Chicago zip code, nobody knew her name. That's exactly what worked. Casting wanted raw and slightly tomboyish over famous, and Chlumsky gave them a Veda who felt like an actual kid. Number 9, Columbia hired child psychologists to calm down panicked parents. November 91. Columbia Pictures had a problem the size of a small bee. They were about to release a family movie starring the most famous child on the planet, and the climax involved his character getting stung to death by a swarm of bees. Marketing meeting from hell. The original plan was pretty simple. You keep Thomas J's death a secret, lock the ending in a vault, and then hope nobody spilled it. Word leaked anyway, because Hollywood secrets have a shelf life of a banana. Now, parents started panicking. Taking the kids to see the new Macaulay Culkin movie suddenly meant volunteering them for emotional damage. So Columbia did something kind of weird and kind of genius, too. They weaponized child psychologists. The studio screened the film for prominent child specialists. They collected the supported reactions and packed 6 full pages of glowing testimonials into the official press kit. They mailed it to journalists and critics across the country, framing the movie as a healthy little getaway into mortality and grief for the under 12 crowd. Not every expert played along, though. Some went to the press warning that the death scene could gut young Home Alone fans. Columbia just kept handing out the friendlier quotes. Between the endorsements and the pure morbid curiosity, My Girl opened strong and went on to be a hit. The studio publicly hired psychologists to handle the trauma that their own movie was about to cause. Number 8, someone turned the saddest scene into a browser game. Yeah, some movies inspire merchandise, but My Girl inspired a browser game that opens with the words, "Accept your fate." In 2014, an unofficial parody dropped online, an 8-bit NES-style tribute to the most heartbreaking sequence in 1991 cinema. You play Thomas J, wandering a pixelated landscape, and your one job is to dodge bees. That's the entire game. You avoid the swarm, survive another second, repeat. But here's the catch. You can't win. The bees scale up until they eventually swallow the screen, no matter how good you are. The Guardian wrote about it like a small philosophical event. The moment players realize they're merely delaying the inevitable, at which point you just take your hands off the keyboard and let the bees finish the job, and then you watch a digitized Anna Chlumsky wail, "He was gonna be an acrobat," before the screen cuts to black. A browser game built on pixelated bees and one devastating callback? I don't know, somewhere a developer looked at the saddest scene of the 90s and thought, you know what, let's gamify that. Weird world. All right, quick pause. If you're enjoying this trip back to 1991, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because unlike the My Girl funeral scene, we promise we're not going to emotionally destroy you. Or at least probably. Now drop your favorite scene in the comments, and if it's not grandma breaking into song at a stranger's funeral, I'm going to judge you a little bit. All right, let's get back to the funeral home / mansion / mobile home living situation. Whatever, let's get into it. Number 7, the screenwriter is still mad about how it turned out. Screenwriter Laurice Elehwany sold the script that became My Girl. She did not, however, sign up to love what came back out the other end. The behind-the-scenes vent moment happened thanks to a small chain of coincidences. As part of the 1991 release rollout, author Patricia Hermes got hired to write the official novelization, turning Elehwany's screenplay into a book aimed at young readers. During that process, Hermes' daughter ended up speaking with Elehwany directly and casually asked what she thought of the finished movie. Big mistake. Or depending on your appetite for Hollywood gossip, an excellent one. Elehwany pulled no punches. She said important elements of her script had been changed during development and then dropped the kind of line that makes an interview transcript go viral years later. I still get angry about it to this day. In her original draft, the death wasn't Thomas J. at all. The dying friend was Veda's older sister, a character who hid in the basement and never came out. Different person, different dynamic, different gut punch entirely. Elehwany told the Baltimore Sun in December of 1991, hey, that rhymed, it was originally much darker than it became. Oof. A basement-bound older sister never seeing daylight again is a completely different movie. That version would have leaned full Southern Gothic instead of summer coming of age. The studio softened it a bit, and the sister became a younger boy. They still got a tearjerker, and it worked. Her name is still on the screenplay credit, but The Grudge, apparently, is still on too.
Number 6, Dan Aykroyd took the role to escape comedy typecasting.
For most of the 1980s, Dan Aykroyd had one assignment in Hollywood. Be loud, be weird, be fast. The Blues Brothers, Ghostbusters, Trading Places, Spies Like Us, like all of Saturday Night Live, audiences had locked him into the wild and crazy guy box. And the box, it wasn't getting any bigger. Aykroyd knew it. By the early 90s, he was actively hunting for scripts that let him sit still, talk softly, and not crash through a wall in a jumpsuit. The first real proof came in 1989 with Driving Miss Daisy. His supporting turn as Bully Worthen was understated, grounded, and completely against type. And Hollywood handed him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor as a thank you note. Suddenly, the guy who played Beldar the Conehead was an Oscar nominee, and the industry had to reshuffle its assumptions. That's when My Girl landed on his desk. Harry Saltonfuss is a grieving, emotionally distant widower who runs a mortuary in his own house and can barely connect with his own daughter. Not a single pratfall in sight. Aykroyd jumped on it immediately, recognizing the role as an opportunity to lean fully into subtlety and let the comedy chops sit in a drawer. And he delivered exactly that. Harry fumbles through every conversation about love and death like a man who'd rather be embalming something. And it works. It's still one of the most grounded performances that Aykroyd ever turned in. No jumpsuit required. Number 5, Jamie Lee Curtis paid the kids every time she cursed. Jamie Lee Curtis ran the most profitable side hustle on the My Girl set, except she was the one losing money. The kids were the ones cashing out. Curtis was deeply protective of Anna Chlumsky and Macaulay Culkin, which made it awkward that she also talked like, in Dan Aykroyd's polite words, a trucker, so a swear could appear on set. $5 every time an adult dropped the S word, 10 for an F-bomb, and the rule caught everyone in earshot. So Curtis, Aykroyd, and director Howard Zieff all paid into the kids' improvised profanity tax bracket. Filming dragged on. The adults kept slipping, and the cans, they kept filling. By wrap, each can was holding a couple $100. That's a small fortune for a 5th grader in 1991. But the payout is where it locks in legendary. On the final day, in front of the entire crew, Curtis gathered both cans, congratulated the kids on wrapping the movie, and celebrated by dropping one last ceremonial F-bomb right at him. Then handed each of them a can stuffed with cash. A grown-up paid 2 children to legally collect swear money, and somehow it's still the most wholesome story on this entire production. Number 4, the townspeople were actually townspeople. My Girl is set in Madison, Pennsylvania, a town that never existed. So to build it, the production scattered across Central Florida. And to fill it with people, they just reached for the folks who were already there. Locals got pulled in as extras. You just ask around Bartow or Sanford today, and you'll still find people who remember it. Neighbors who spent a summer hanging around the set
Watch Dan Aykroyd and Jamie Lee Curtis between takes.
and turned up somewhere in the background of a movie that outlived all of them. That's the quiet trick of the whole thing. The faces drifting through the edges of frame, filling out the sidewalks and the crowd scenes, they weren't shipped in from a casting agency 3 states away. They were Floridians playing Pennsylvanians, and most of them, well, they never had to act. They just had to show up and be a small town because, well, they already were one. Madison, Pennsylvania was make-believe, but the community standing in for it wasn't. Number 3, Anna Chlumsky quit Hollywood to fact-check restaurant reviews. Huh? From a face that no one knew, Anna Chlumsky became one of the most recognizable kid stars of the early 90s. My Girl 1 in 1991, My Girl 2 in 1994, magazine covers, awards, the works. And then, well, she vanished. For roughly a decade, she became a textbook, whatever happened to, mystery. What happened was that she got tired of Hollywood treating her like a product. Hitting her teenage years, she ran into the industry's ugliest hobby, telling young actresses that everything is wrong with their bodies. She's been open about being told that she was too fat or not pretty enough for roles. The rejection piled up, and the critiques got personal. The breaking point came in a parked car. She's described sitting there after one more audition, staring at the script in the passenger seat, and realizing, look, she didn't have to do this anymore. So she stopped. She's since called walking away one of the most liberating things she ever did. So she enrolled at the University of Chicago, threw herself into actual student life, and graduated in 2002 with a degree in international studies. Then she joined the regular workforce in New York, fact-checking for the Zagat restaurant guides, and then editing at a HarperCollins sci-fi imprint. The kid who broke a generation's heart on screen was quietly chasing down whether a bistro really took reservations. Then it gnawed at her. She missed it a bit. She enrolled at New York's Atlantic Acting School to relearn the craft as an adult, and in 2012 landed stressed-out Chief of Staff Amy Bruckheimer on HBO's Veep, a comeback that nobody saw coming. Number 2, they filmed in a funeral home and something stayed behind. That mansion didn't stop at playing spooky. According to hauntedplaces.org, a regular pin on every ghost hunter's map, the building came with a resident spirit. And before you question a website with haunted in the name, the evidence is exactly what you guess. Weird sounds, footsteps, and a lot of confident vibes. Guests reported a full party going on in the dining and bar area at odd hours. Chatter, clinking glasses, only to walk in and find the room empty. Doors open and closed on their own. Disembodied footsteps walked the main staircase, always when nobody was around to fake it. The alleged culprit is a former owner named Lee Merriweather, who apparently decided being dead was no reason to leave a good dining room. A house that played a funeral home became a bed and breakfast, and then picked up a ghost. And when the inn quietly closed its doors around 2012, well, look, I'm not saying that the ghost ran off the guest. I'm just saying that nobody asked the ghost. Number 1, they released thousands of real bees onto a 10-year-old. The death scene is the part that everyone remembers. And it turns out the way that they filmed it is somehow worse than the scene itself. For Thomas J's final moments, the production used real bees. We're not talking props, no CGI, thousands of live bees, released directly on a 10-year-old Macaulay Culkin. In his own words, I'm not joking. Those are real bees. That would not fly today. And then, of course, he joked about flies and bees and whatever. But anyways, here's how they pulled it off. A bee wrangler coated Culkin's fingertips with a substance that mimicked the queen bee's pheromone, so the swarm would gather on his hands instead of treating him like a threat. Then they told him to wave his hands near his face to get the cloud on camera. He was also told not to touch anything else. He brushed his pants once, and then the bees swarmed those too. The safety plan was just as wild. The second director, Howard Zieff, yelled, "Cut!" Culkin dunked his hands into hot soapy water and then sprinted into the woods. The bee handler's advice was, hey, it's okay, human beings run faster than bees flies. And Culkin's response, oh so clever, even at age 10, but how fast do you think I am? 4 takes, 1 stinger to the neck, and one of the saddest scenes in 90s cinema. Powered by a child actor doused in queen pheromone, acting as a human beehive on command. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird facts about My Girl. Which fact hit you the hardest? Well, drop it in the comments and share this with a friend who still can't watch a willow tree without tearing up. Until next time, this is Remember When.